I got a pay rise and a new job title on the same Tuesday, and both of them came out of a man's life. Not out of thin air, not out of some budget line somebody freed up, out of a 58-year-old named Errol who had done the same job for 11 years and found out he no longer had it in a meeting he was not invited to. I wrote the thing that made him unnecessary. I wrote it on a wet Sunday because I liked him and I wanted him to stop starting work at 4 in the morning, and 11 days later my manager stood up in a room with a jug of water and a plate of biscuits on it and used my weekend favor to cut a person out of the company. Then he gave me that person's job. Then he shook my hand and told me to be a grown-up about it. What I actually want to tell you about is what happened 3 months later when the thing I wrote did exactly what he had quietly arranged for it to do, and 31,000 people got charged for parking they never used, and families sat trapped on level 6 of a hospital car park in the rain at 9:30 on a Sunday morning. And the one person alive who could untangle it was 2 days into 10 days of not speaking to anybody. So, tollbridge systems. We make the guts of car parks. Not the concrete, the money part, the machine you feed your ticket into on the way out, the barrier that lifts, the little app nobody wants but everybody has, and the overnight process where every garage's takings get matched up against what our machines say happened. For 100 and some garages across the country, hospitals and shopping centers, and one horrible multi-story by the station that floods. It is the least glamorous industry on earth, and I loved it, genuinely, because when it works nobody thinks about you, and when it breaks a man in a Vauxhall starts leaning on his horn in a concrete box, and you can hear it in the phone lines. Immediate feedback. Very honest work. I had been there 4 years, started on the support desk, moved on to the engineering side because I kept fixing things instead of logging them. No degree. I mentioned that because in September I signed up for a 2-year part-time furniture making and restoration diploma at the college 11 miles up the road, Tuesday and Thursday evenings, £310 a month for 24 months, and the first payment had already left my account before any of this started. That was my thing. My wife Nadia thought it was hilarious for about a week, and then she built me a bench in the garage out of scaffold boards and stopped laughing about it, which is her whole personality in one sentence. When I say I had a stake in this, that is the stake. Not a house, not a wedding. A monthly direct debit for a hobby that I had decided, in a quiet way I had not said out loud to anyone including her, was going to be the thing I did instead of this by the time I was 50. My manager was Gavin. Late 40s, rimless little glasses, permanent half smile, the kind of man who remembers your kids' names and uses them. In my own head, I called him the windscreen, because of the glasses. Whenever he was about to say something he had already decided before he walked in the room, he would take them off and polish them on the hem of his shirt, slowly, looking down, while whoever was talking kept talking. By the second month, I could predict the outcome of any meeting by watching his shirt. And I want to be fair, because this is not a story about a cartoon. In my first winter there, Marek's dad had a stroke, and Gavin took over Marek's on-call for 9 straight days without telling anybody he had done it, including Marek, who found out from the phone rota. He slept badly for over a week, so a 26-year-old could sit in a hospital in Wolverhampton. I knew that about him. I keep having to remind myself I knew that about him. Errol Kid was the overnight matching. That was not his job title, that was just what he was. Every night, in some form or other, the numbers from 400 garages had to be lined up against the numbers from 400 garages owners, and every night some of them did not line up, because a machine went offline in a thunderstorm, or a garage manager ran a cash drawer twice, or somebody's barrier arm got snapped off by a lorry. Errol found them. He had a paper notebook. An actual notebook, ruled, with a rubber band round it, and he would ring garage managers at 7 in the morning and say, "Morning, it's Errol from Tollbridge. I think your machine 2 ate about 900 quid on Friday," and they would laugh and sort it out, because he had been ringing some of these people for a decade. He started at 4. He had done 4 starts since 2013. He had a flask and a very old fleece, and he could tell you which garage in Bristol had a pigeon problem. I wrote the program because he came in one Monday gray as putty and told me he'd fallen asleep at a red light. I did it over one Sunday and most of the following weekend, and it was not clever. It just did the boring bit. Pull both sides, line them up, flag the ones that did not agree. And because I am not an idiot, I put a stop in it. If a garage's numbers did not agree within a very small tolerance, the program did nothing at all for that garage. It did not adjust. It did not correct. It stopped, left everything exactly where it was, and rang a human being. That was the entire design. That was the only part one was actually proud of. Errol cried a bit when I showed him. Not properly, just eyes, and he said something about getting his mornings back, and then he made a joke about how now he'd have to find out what his wife looks like awake. He asked me to show Gavin. I said sure. Here is the meeting. Thursday, the big room, the one with the wonky blind. 11 people. Priya from testing, who has an eye roll you can hear. Merrick. Marguerite, who runs the support desk and speaks at a volume calibrated for a phone floor. Toby, who had started 6 days earlier and did not know where the bins were. Errol was not there, because Errol worked nights, and it was 2 in the afternoon, and Errol was asleep. Colette came in halfway through with the water jug and the little packets of biscuits, put them down, took the dead mugs off the side, and stood by the door for a minute sorting the whiteboard pins into the ones that worked and the ones that did not, the way she has done in that building for 14 years. Gavin had my program on the screen, running, matching a night of garages in about 90 seconds. He said, "This is a program of work we've been driving for some time now." Those words. A program of work. I remember my thumb going into the underside of the desk. Then he said, "So on the back of this, we're going to be simplifying the overnight function." Nobody said anything. Marguerite looked at me. I said, "Sorry, what does simplifying mean?" Gavin took his glasses off. Started on the shirt hem. He said, "It means the overnight function as a manual role no longer exists. Errol's position is going. And Owen, I want you to step up into it, properly, with the money that goes with it. You've earned it. I want you to understand that I did not say the correct thing. I said, hang on. I said, he doesn't know. He's asleep. He doesn't know." And Gavin said, "He'll be spoken to today, and Owen, let's be grown-ups about it." That was his phrase. Let's be grown-ups about it. He said it maybe 400 times in the time I knew him, and it always meant the same thing, which was, I have already done this, and you are being emotional. I said, this doesn't replace him. He rings people. He knows the pigeon garage. Priya, God bless her, said, the what, and Gavin talked over it. And then I said the thing that mattered, and I said it loudly, and I said it while Colette was 2 meters away with a fistful of dead marker pens, because I have gone over that afternoon in my head roughly 9,000 times since. I said, it does not fix anything. It cannot fix anything. If the numbers disagree, it stops dead, and it wakes a person up. That's the whole point of it. It doesn't guess. Somebody still has to be Errol. Gavin put his glasses back on and said, that's very honest of you. And then he moved on to head count. The group chat afterwards was a disaster. Marguerite typed one message, in capitals, that was just Errol's name and 4 question marks. Priya sent a picture of a bin on fire. Merrick sent nothing for an hour and then sent, is this happening? And then, is Owen okay? Toby, who did not know anybody yet, sent a thumbs up to the wrong message and then a second message saying sorry, wrong chat. And everybody left it because what else do you do? Priya caught me by the stairs. She has a way of standing where she blocks the whole doorway with about 50 kilos of body weight. She said, you know he's had that queued up since June. He asked me in June whether the matching could be done without a person. She said it flatly, like she was reading a train timeout. Then she said, that's not on you, and left, which is the single kindest thing anyone said to me that month. Errol got told at 4 that afternoon, over the phone, at home, in his kitchen. I know it was the kitchen because he told me. He rang me himself, that evening, and I have never been more frightened of a phone in my life. And the first thing he said was, don't you dare. He said, I've watched you build that thing, and I'm not having you carry it. He said the redundancy money was actually decent, and he'd been thinking about the caravan. He said his back was finished anyway. He said, take the job. Owen, take the money. You've got that course to pay for. I had mentioned the course to him once, in a car park, in September. I took the job. Let's be extremely clear about that, because I am not the hero of this. 310 pounds a month, 24 months, and a raise of about 400 a month after tax landed in exactly the right-shaped hole. I sat in the car outside of Sainsbury's and did the sum on my phone before I emailed my acceptance. Nadia asked me if I felt sick about it, and I said yes, and she said, good, that's the correct amount, and then she made me eat something. Errol's last day was the 29th of October. There was a card. Somebody bought a cake from the big Tesco, and Marguerite made a speech that went on for 11 minutes and got better as it went. Errol gave me his notebook, the actual notebook with the rubber band. He said, "Page 40 on is all the phone numbers, and the one for the Leeds fellow is wrong. He's changed it. I've written the new one in the front." Then he shook my hand and went out to his car, and that was that. And then, for 3 months, nothing bad happened at all. That is the part one still find hard to explain. The program ran every night, and it was good. It was really good. It stopped twice in the first fortnight, once for a genuine outage in Coventry and once because a garage in Southampton double-keyed their cache. And both times it woke me up, and both times I rang somebody at 7 in the morning like Errol used to, and both times they laughed and sorted it out. I got quite fond of my 4:15 alarm on the nights it fired. I started to understand why he had the flask. Gavin had the best autumn of his career. He presented at the all-hands in October with a slide that said, in enormous letters, 0 manual touches, and there was a little animation where a clock spun backwards. He got nominated for the internal thing they do, the quarterly award, which is a glass block with your name sandblasted into it. He won it. He put it on the shelf behind his desk where it caught the light off the window and gave everybody a headache. Somebody in support started calling him Zero Touch behind his back, and it stuck for about a fortnight before it got boring. He also sent Errol a reference so good that Errol forwarded it to me. That is the flicker I keep tripping over. It was 3 paragraphs, and it was warm, and it was specific, and it mentioned the Pigeon Garage. Errol got 2 days a week at a builder's merchant in January off the back of it. And I sat there in November thinking, honestly thinking, maybe I made that meeting into something it wasn't. Maybe he's just a man who does hard things badly instead of a man who does bad things well. Maybe the money is just money and the work is just work, and I'm a bloke with a raise and a bench in the garage and a dovetail joint that looks like it was chewed rather than cut. I stopped rehearsing arguments in the shower. I remember consciously deciding to stop. One thing. Mid-October, a Tuesday, I came back from lunch and Toby was coming out of the small meeting room by the kitchen, the one with no window, and he was pink in the face and holding his laptop against his chest like a schoolbook. He said hiya in a strangled voice and went past me fast. Gavin came out about 40 seconds later. Colette went in after him with a tray and came out with 3 mugs and the biscuit plate. I thought, poor sods had a talking to about something, and I went and ate a sandwich. Kaisa left for Wales on the 27th. Kaisa Errol had built the original banking side of the whole company 9 years before I got there, the part that actually moves money in and out and speaks to the banks. And she had spent 9 years being the only person who properly understood it. And in October she had told Gavin, in writing, that she was taking 10 days off in a farmhouse in mid-Wales where they lock your phone in a box at reception and nobody speaks. Not to staff, not to each other, not at meals. 10 days. She had booked it in June. She had put it in the calendar in red. She had, and I found this out later, offered to cancel it and been told to enjoy herself. The city Christmas lights got switched on that Saturday. Biggest parking weekend of the year, by a long way. We had onboarded a new chain called Kestrel 3 weeks before, 42 garages, and their systems reported their takings in a way that was very slightly, boringly, 10 minutes out of step with ours. At 3:50 on the Sunday morning, the program found 400 and something mismatches across the Kestrel garages, and it did not stop. It corrected them. Merrick rang me at 7:10. I know because I looked at the phone before I answered it, and the sky outside was the color of a wet paving slab. He did not say hello. He said, "Owen, are the barriers meant to be doing this?" And his voice had gone up about a third in pitch, like a kid's. I said, "What barriers?" And he said, "All of them. Here is what it looked like from the outside, which is the only way it matters." Somewhere around 6 in the morning, people who had parked in the city on Saturday night started getting charged. Not once. Some of them 4 times, some of them 11 times. A woman in Sheffield was charged £340 in 8 minutes for a 2-hour stay. People got charged for garages in cities they had never been to, because the corrections went sideways across the whole chain. Sunday morning, payday weekend, and thousands of phones buzzing on bedside tables with the same bank alert over and over. And then, because all of those accounts were now nonsense, the exit terminals started refusing tickets. You drive up to the barrier, you feed your ticket in, and the little screen goes blank for a second and then says, in white on red, "Session not found." And the barrier does not lift. And there is a car behind you. And a car behind that one. 14 garages, including the hospital one. I got to the office at 7:50 because I did not know what else to do with my body. Merrick was already there in a hoodie over pajama bottoms, vaping like a chimney, with 2 laptops. Marguerite came in at 8:15 with her coat still on and her phone against her ear, and she did not put the phone down for 6 hours. Priya arrived, took one look at the wall of red on the big screen, and said, "Right," and sat down and started making a list, which is what she does instead of panicking. Toby turned up at 9 on a Sunday because someone had put a message in the general chat, and he did not know yet that he was allowed to ignore it. He had brought a carrier bag of pastries. He stood in the doorway holding it, and nobody had the heart. The support line had 4 people rostered. By 9 we had 19. I answered phones. I answered phones for the first 3 hours of it because there was nothing else useful I could do with my hands. And I want to tell you what that sounds like, because it does not sound like a technical problem. It sounds like a man in Nottingham who has been in a car park for 50 minutes with a 2-year-old in the back who needs the toilet. It sounds like a woman saying, very calmly, "I have got to be at my mother's ward by 10. She is not well. Please," and then not being calm. It sounds like a garage manager in Leeds shouting off the side of the call at somebody who is hitting a barrier arm. Somebody in Manchester had the fire brigade turn out because the ramp queue had backed up and blocked a service door. Police came out to 2 sites because the queues were sitting on a ring road junction. Marguerite put her hand over her phone at about 9:30 and said, to the room, "They're not angry. That's the thing. Half of them aren't even angry." And then she went into the stairwell, and I heard her crying through the door, and then I heard her blow her nose and come back out and pick the phone back up. We tried things. God, we tried things. First, we turned the program off. That did nothing, obviously, because the money had already moved and the accounts were already wrong. But you have to do it. You have to stop the bleeding. And there is a horrible 5 minutes where you realize stopping it has changed exactly nothing. Then Priya said, "Put every garage into free exit. Just open everything. Let everyone out. We'll argue about it Monday." Which was completely right. It worked on 8 garages. On the older terminals, the setting has to be pushed from the account side, which was the exact thing that was broken, and one operator's duty manager flat refused for 40 minutes because it was his biggest takings night of the year, and he wanted it in writing from someone senior. Nobody senior was answering. Gavin's phone rang out 4 times. Then we tried to reverse the charges in bulk, which meant a file, which meant the banking side, which meant Kaisa. Her phone went straight to a recorded message. Merrick rang the retreat's landline at 10:10 and it rang out, because they staffed the office from 9 till 11 and it was Sunday and the woman was at the morning sitting. He rang back at 20 past. A woman answered and was extremely kind and completely immovable. No, she could not go and get her. She could not knock on the door. The phones were in a box and the box was locked, and the whole point of the thing, she said, was that it did not have exceptions, otherwise nobody would ever really put it down. She said she would put a note under the door and it would be read after the afternoon sitting. Merrick said, "It's an emergency," and she said, "I'm sure it is, love." Kaisa's sister drove up from Shrewsbury and got there at 1:30 and sat in the car park of a farmhouse in Powys and was not allowed past the gate either. Meanwhile, Merrick and I tried to build the reversal file ourselves off an old set of notes, and we submitted it at 2:20, and it reversed 206 charges from the previous Wednesday. Real charges. Correct ones. Money going back to people who owed it, out of a company that was already bleeding. Merrick put his head down on the desk and stayed there for about 30 seconds, and then sat up and said, "Right. What else?" And I have never respected anyone more. Somebody suggested restoring the previous night's numbers. The previous night's numbers had been overwritten by the corrections. That was the moment Priya stopped writing on her list. Gavin arrived at 3:20 in the afternoon in a fleece, and I have to describe his face because I had never seen it before and I have not seen it since. He was gray, not pale, gray, the color of the sky outside, and his mouth was doing something on its own. He stood in the middle of the floor and looked at the big screen and said, "What's the position?" And Marguerite, who had been on the phone for 7 hours, said, "The position is I've got a man on hold in a car park in Hull who's missed a funeral." He said, "Let's all be grown-ups about it." Nobody answered him. Nobody said anything at all for about 4 seconds, and that is the loudest 4 seconds I have ever been in. Kaisa got the note at 6:10. She broke the silence at 20:10 at night, on the retreat's office phone, with the poor woman presumably standing there watching a rule get shattered, and she talked Merrick through the reversal properly. And it took until 20 past 1 in the morning, and by then every garage was open and it was Monday. 31,000 for 111 wrong charges. 206 good ones. We killed ourselves. 2 national papers by Tuesday. A hospital trust that is still, as far as I know, not speaking to us. Monday afternoon, the big room. Wonky blind. Halina, our CEO, who I had previously spoken to twice in 4 years and both times about biscuits, came down from the 4th floor and sat at the head of the table and did not have a laptop with her, which I found more frightening than anything else that weekend. 15 or 16 of us. Merrick asleep sitting up. Toby against the back wall. She said, right. What happened? That was it. That was the whole question. And then she waited, and she kept waiting. And it turns out that a senior person who is prepared to just sit in silence is an absolutely terrifying instrument. Gavin talked for 6 minutes about Kestrel, their file format, their timing, the onboarding, the fact that we had been handed something substandard and had integrated it in good faith under commercial pressure. He was good at it. He was genuinely good at it. Halina let him finish and then said, and our own system did what? Exactly, when it got that. He said it adjusted the records to reconcile them. She said, why? And he said, because a change was made in October that I have been looking into since yesterday. A change I did not authorize. He said, and I don't want to point fingers on day one, and then pointed one straight down the table and said, but Toby made that change off his own back, and he's very new. And frankly, that's a supervision failure on my part more than anything. Toby made a noise. Not a word. A noise, like someone who has been elbowed. Halina said, explain yourself properly, and Gavin took his glasses off. He said, look, and started polishing them on his shirt, and he said, I think there's also an honest question about the original build. That thing was never designed with a stop in it. It was designed to reconcile. That's what it was sold to us as, and I think if we're being grown-ups about it, Owen would tell you the same. I said no. He said, Owen. I said no. I said it in that room in September. I said it does not fix anything. It stops and it wakes a person up, and I said it standing about where you're sitting. And he said, with total, oily calm, I think we all remember that meeting slightly differently, mate. And Colette said, no we don't. I had genuinely forgotten she was in the room. She was by the door with the water jug in one hand, because she had come in to do what she does at 1:30 every single day of her life, and she had not put it down yet. Nobody had asked her anything. Nobody had asked her anything in 14 years. She said, you said it doesn't guess, Owen. You said somebody still has to be Errol. I was doing the pens. Then she looked at Gavin and she said, and you sat with that lad in the little room on the 15th of October and told him to take the stop out because the board slide needed the clean number. I was in there with the tray. You said it while I was picking the mugs up. She put the jug down on the side, the way she always does, and she said, I'll not stand here and watch you do that to him. He's 22. Gavin reached for his glasses and his hand was going so badly that he set them down on the table instead, except he did not. He missed it by about an inch, and they went on the carpet, and he did not pick them up. He was gone by Thursday. Not walked out by anybody, no drama, just gone. And the glass block with his name sandblasted into it sat on that shelf for another 6 weeks until somebody put it in a drawer. There was an investigation. Toby kept his job, and Halina told him so herself, in front of people, which I thought was the single best thing she did. Marguerite got the phone team doubled. Kaisa came back and did not talk about Wales and has taken exactly 0 days off since, which worries me. And on the 11th of December, Errol Kid came back on a contract that pays him roughly 40% more than his old salary for 3 days a week and no 4 in the mornings, because Halina rang him herself, and because when she asked me what we needed, I said his name, and then could not say anything else for a bit. He runs the matching now. My program does the boring part. The stop is back in, and it is louder than it was. He kept the notebook. He brought it back with him. I am 11 months into 24. 310 pounds leaves my account on the 2nd of every month, and every Tuesday and Thursday I stand in a cold workshop off the ring road cutting joints slightly wrong. Nadia has a spice rack she is being very polite about. Errol came round in March and looked at it for a long time and said, that's a proper bit of work, that. And I had to go and stand in the garden.